It's time for the Unfair Advantage sessions, where I get the opportunity to speak to some of the world's top leaders in the digital, social, and research technology space. And my name is Kelvin Jonck. I'm the MD of YOUKNOW, and these interviews are intended to deep dive into the lives, the careers that guided these tech leaders to their successes, with the goal of uncovering what their unfair advantage is. And today I'm extremely honored and pleased to have the highly respected and influential leader of Dynamo and Blue Robot, Sean Riley, with me today. Welcome, Sean. Good to have you.
Hi, Kelvin. Thanks for having me.
No, awesome. So, let's start right at the beginning. The trend I see in a lot of these discussions is, with some of the entrepreneurs that we've spoken to, is they've started young, doing something in school or maybe even just after school, which seemed to put them in that correct frame of mind to start something later. And was that the same with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I would call myself an entrepreneur from a young age. Beginning at the age of about 11, I had a market in Belleville. I would steal pots and pans from inside my mom's cupboards and sell them. And obviously a massive profit because I had no cost of stock. And eventually I matured and I started sourcing wholesale products and selling them at the market. Washed teachers' cars at school. Through varsity, I actually, believe it or not, I was a runner back at varsity, and I ran the university's athletics bar, sort of would train and then open the bar after training for everyone else. And yeah, so very much in my blood, and like to think of myself as having a lot of hustle from a young age.
Yeah, amazing. And so you went to varsity. Where did you go to varsity?
Stellenbosch,
right? And then you went to the UK. Was it straight after that, right?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So what was that experience like for you? How did that kind of start forging the seedlings of what happened next?
Yeah, I think so. When I first arrived in London, I guess my sort of self-esteem or belief in myself was, I just kind of thought that everyone would be better than me. So my first few jobs were really dodgy. I worked at a place called Tip Top Turf doing roll-on lawn, packing roll-on lawn on the back of tractors, and was a temp for Office Angels, handing out faxes in alphabetical order on people's desks. And I actually had a bit of a break. I worked at Bank Paribas on Oxford Street, and my job literally was to take old furniture, and they would have skips out on Oxford Street, and I would take this old furniture, throw it in the skip, and then crush it with a big pole so that we could get more old furniture into the skip. And I reported into this secretary, and she wrote me a fantastic letter of reference without any reference to my actual job. She just, on the Bank Paribas letterhead said I was a team player. I was, I took on any task with utmost diligence. And I ended up getting a break at Credit Suisse in derivatives. And in fact, that sort of really, that boss of mine there became one of my very best friends and remains a great friend today.
Amazing. What did you do at Credit Suisse?
So Credit Suisse was in operations. So I did recons for futures and options trades. And then along the way, I started building tactical applications for the bank in parallel to that role as well.
Coding is that what you're doing?
Coding. Yeah, I was coding, and probably maybe a bit of context there. We had some really big issues, and for those that are familiar with with futures and options, we have variation margin, which you might not reconcile. You might be out by £1 today, but that £1 could actually mean that you're out by $1 billion. And so we had some really big risks that we were trying to grapple with, and we had a tactical applications team that were wanting to put a project in place, and they were talking about 9 to 12 months delivery, and we were kind of, no, we have this problem right now. So I wrote code to solve the problem, and and obviously took a lot of flack and a lot of criticism about the quality of my code and so on. But the reality is that it worked, and the bank ended up using that code for close to 20 years. So I was quite proud of having done that.
Wow, I had a experience, I worked at the car phone warehouse in London as one of my first big jobs. And I think my coding was that bad that I brought down their billing system for 2 days. And then had to bring in the big guns to kind of somehow rebuild whatever they had in place. That was a crazy experience. So
Wow.
I mean, I guess it was after this that you started building your own stuff. Is that, I mean, after that experience, you ended up coming back to SA, and what led you to do that? You know, was there some kind of confidence,
Yeah.
I guess, that you were able to build on coming out of that corporate space?
So actually, the catalyst for me leaving the bank was actually that I built a fuzzy logic trading model, which I guess you could call fuzzy logic the precursor to AI today. And I remember being referred into one of the directors at the bank, and I walked in, and I was 30 seconds into my pitch, and he interrupted me and said, "Sorry, do you have a PhD in maths?" And I said, "No, I don't." He said, "So I only deal with people." He said, "I only deal with people with PhDs." And he didn't want to hear the idea. And I said to him, "But you know, fuzzy logic isn't even taught at varsity at any universities right now. You know, I've self-taught myself this. I've built a model that I believe works." He didn't want to hear about it. So for me, it was that was the catalyst to say, let me go back to South Africa, the land of opportunity, and and that was my sort of that's what led me to move on. And yes, when I got to SA, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, and I ended up very quickly falling into building a share trading platform.
How long did that take? What was that journey? Because if that was the first foray into this, was it successful?
Yeah, so I like to think so. So it was quite a journey. Obviously, building a online share trading platform in '98 was pretty leading edge back then. So it was really interesting. Even just the web languages we used don't exist today anymore. They were quite hard to scale up on. But it was quite a journey, and also of course along that way licensed that tech to E-Trade in the US. And being exposed to Silicon Valley at an early age was quite something, and seeing how they operated. And possibly, Kelvin, there's actually one story I want to share that for the more technical people, they might enjoy it. But okay. One thing we were really proud of was that the JSE was still coming to terms with the notion of online trading. And so we had an API for live market data, but we actually weren't allowed to inject a trade into the market automatically. So their rule initially was that there had to be an air gap. There had to be a trader who worked through a JETS terminal, the JSE's trading terminals, and he had to press a button to send that trade to market. So obviously, like, we were concerned that there could just be typing errors, also speed. The whole benefit, one of the big benefits of online trading is that when you press that button, the trade takes place. So we actually literally had a trader, we had a broker sitting outside our server room with a serial cable running from one server all the way through the wall to his JET terminal. And we had analyzed the JET terminal and built keystroke emulation. That so when a trade came through on the server, it emulated the correct sequence of keystrokes to populate the trade on his screen, and he just sat there and pressed enter as they came through.
What a job.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was your first foray into it, successful, and then you founded Intelligence, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. What was that business about? What did you guys do?
So what actually had happened is my business that had built the share trading platform, we had sold to a listed company at the time called eData. So at a very young age, thought that I was going to be ridiculously rich. Unfortunately, they defaulted immediately, and their business kind of started to collapse around them quite quickly. And we had built this team of 25 developers. Back then, to have 25 developers, was a pretty big thing. We had to train them up internally. So, we decided to take the business back, and I was in a fortunate position to be introduced to GT Ferreira, our first rand bank. And he wrote me a check on a handshake over a first introduction at a meeting, and the rest is history. And Intelligence was born.
And that was, and you ran that for 10 years, something like 10 years, almost a decade, right?
Yes.
What would you say were some of the main learnings from that led you to, later success in the following decade?
Great. So I guess with a shareholder like GT, we had to strike the balance between, he wasn't an investor interested in a healthy 10% annual return. His kind of mandate was go out and build something big. And but at the same time, we had to first of all find the balance between being brave enough to build something big, but also being in a position to pay our own bills so that we weren't going back every day for a handout to cover costs. So that was interesting for us. I think the journey of straddling innovation, but also just common business sense, and building there are all these fantastic stories about businesses that build that moon landing product. But the reality is that sometimes a little bit of luck is needed to do that, and also being in a position to pay salaries to build a sustainable business is equally important. So I think we learned to strike that balance. We had a few big successes. We had many failures. So you asked about lessons from there. Probably my biggest lesson on product development is something I call the cup holder trap. And you would we had a piece of project management software called Wonder, and we would take this into clients and present it, and they would say, wow, if it could do this as well, that would be quite interesting. And then obviously I'm a developer, our business is technical. So I would run off and literally have it built by the end of the day and then go back to them, but still not make a sale. And so what happened is we took a look back at Wonder, and we had it was this amalgamation of knowledge management, project management, performance management, balanced scorecard for business strategy. It was really quite a complicated product, and it was a very complicated narrative as well when you're trying to pitch it to a client. And what we actually did is we took all these cup holders that we had built to try close sales, and we'd realized that just bolting on more features didn't you have to solve one real need particularly well. And if you do that, clients will always overlook the nice to haves. And I mean, Apple's first iPhone is a great example of being revolutionary, but also being very basic. And compared to other phones out there, you couldn't copy and paste, you couldn't send an MMS. And so what we actually did with Wonder, just out of it, to close that story for you, we actually we hid a lot of the features, and we took one product and we broke it up into 4 products. And we would go and we would sell a knowledge management solution and a project management solution. And inevitably, after installing it, the client would say, I wish I could do this. And we say, well, actually it can. Let us just switch that on for you. And so actually simplifying the product led to success. And that's, definitely something we've seen. I think too many sort of, product development businesses out there believe that features will give them the win. And we've just learned the hard way that you have to do what you set out to do extremely well. And the features are just a natural evolution, but I don't believe that they drive success.
One of my early mentors kept saying that if you try and sell everything, you sell nothing. So you're right.
Yes.
Focus, I think, is so vital. So I mean, you guys you're running the business. It's 10 years in. Suddenly it's 2009. Everyone's kind of busy finding their feet as to how to effectively monetize not only this digital space, but maybe even more so the social media space. And then you start at Dynamo. Is that right? Around about 2009?
That's right. Yes.
So what was the market like at that point? In terms of competition, influences, or interest from clients, that kind of thing.
Great. So yeah, we had over the sort of in the 3 years lead up to 2009 built quite a big digital marketing capability. But the reality back then was that your options, if you were looking to promote brands online, were Google, Facebook, and then MSN. But essentially, it was Google, and they were the dominant option. And we kind of identified a opportunity to create a bit more choice and a bit of competition in the market. And so that led us to launch at Dynamo as a contextual ad network that we built from scratch. And yeah, that was that was the beginning of our Dynamo.
Yeah, and then I mean, I assume, you guys are historically known as being the Twitter partners in Africa. And I assume that signing Twitter on as a partner must have been a massive inflection point for the company. How did that even come about? Did you know someone there? Did they come to you? What's the story there?
Yeah, so we had been running our ad network since 2009. We had built some real scale. So the ad network was reaching 58 million unique users a day. So we're really proud of that. We're doing some innovative things. We actually issued our own Visa debit card to bloggers, so that we could actually, back then, if you were a blogger with Google, you would essentially get your money 180 days later because they were still posting checks. And to be in a position where we could just top up your card on the first day of every month actually led to, just out of interest, Google ended up being our biggest advertiser by 2013. Google was buying and reselling 92% of our traffic. So we had started off to compete with them, and they ended up being our biggest clients. But yes, we had in 2013, we had actually been selling Twitter non-exclusively alongside a few, so we had a few premium publishers out there. Twitter was one of them. So we were selling them alongside about 7 other resellers in South Africa. And I'd actually had a call with a lady at Twitter who, where I just explored the opportunity to become their official reseller in the market, and heard nothing back, but had a good conversation. And then literally at the end of 2013, got a call from an exec, flew in the next day. We spent 2 days, and a week later we were appointed as their reseller. And we got quite lucky because they were about to make a decision, to go with somebody else. And unfortunately, this person at Twitter was a notorious meticulous note keeper, and she had pulled out her conversation and said, "You have to also chat to these guys." And yeah, they obviously Twitter, Twitter was life-changing for us. It led us to actually closing down our ad network reluctantly, but we just very quickly made a call on return on effort. It was much easier to sell Twitter than to sell an ad network that competed with Google.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, since then you've added a whole host of premium partners to that list. Which ones have they been?
So Verizon Media, which is probably the least known in terms of brand, but is really exciting because it delivers real performance, and then Spotify as well as Snapchat. Right.
I mean, those are massive brands, and I presume it's easier once you've proven to these kind of guys that the work you've done with someone like a Twitter worked. So you could almost hopefully walk through the door and kind of sign them up at will. But then in 2016, you started another company, Blue Robot, right? How come?
Yes.
What was the point of that?
So that was around the time that we made the call to disconnect our ad network, but we still had technical capability. And we were seeing, so initially Blue Robot started with a very strong Twitter focus. So we were seeing brands around the world doing very interesting things with Twitter's APIs. But in South Africa, especially, or across all of Africa, brands sort of liked what they were seeing, but no brand is going to experiment with 6 weeks of dev for a creative idea. It's just too costly, and it's just, the risk is too high. So what we look to do is to take some experiences that brands were building on using Twitter's APIs and make them instantly available to businesses. So we launched a variety of experiences, such as, for example, tweet to unlock. So, interacting with a tweet can unlock a coupon or a reward of some sort. And yeah, that's, I guess, with, Blue Robot has evolved. We have a very strong messaging capability now. We're also a Facebook marketing partner. We're doing a lot of work on WhatsApp, and probably like the bigger, we feel that Blue Robot's journey is only beginning, but we're really proud of the fact that more than half the revenue comes from outside of Africa.
Yeah, I know you mentioned to me before that kind of launching Blue Robot internationally taught you some hard lessons, important lessons. What specifically do you take out of that kind of experience?
Yeah, so I guess the tough lesson for a South African business, looking to set down roots in London. We sort of were having good conversations for the first 2 years, but whenever we kind of got close to signing a big client, it just didn't really go anywhere. And we started hearing a couple of rumors that Blue Robot was great for Africa, but we're kind of like hearing that there was kind of concern about that African connection, which I guess is disappointing. And we had also used Blue Robot as a way to retain talent. So we had actually migrated a lot of South Africans over to the UK. And we actually just after 2 years made a call that we were going to hire local, and that changed our fortunes there. And Blue Robots is very much headquartered in London now, but unfortunately, not many South Africans are part of that part of the business internationally. But that was quite tough, I guess. We know that culturally as well. There is a cultural divide. With British people, you tend to leave every meeting thinking that you crushed it, because South Africans are very direct. So I think over here, we know that when we go to a meeting, if the client doesn't want it, they will tell us it. But the British don't really do that. So that took a bit of adjusting to, calibrating to those cultural differences.
So do you remember who your first Dynamo client was and what you did for them?
That's a great question. So our first proper publisher was actually MSN through and Habari Media back in the day was actually very kind enough to strike a deal with us and make some of their unsold ad inventory available to us. And obviously, as an ad network, critical to be able to have something to sell. MSN was our first publisher through Habari. And our first advertiser, I would actually say that probably the first agency that really took a stab at it was probably Ogilvy. So Ogilvy, in terms of like, a big name agency who let us through the door to tell our story was Ogilvy. And so we're lucky to have a few brave souls out there willing to try something new. What was fascinating for us, of course, was that as an ad network, we got interrogated heavily on any data we shared. So when we talked about performance and scale, agencies and brands were very hard on, where does this data come from? How can we trust it? And of course, as soon as you work with the likes of Twitter or Snap, the data is automatically assumed to be right. What I do enjoy about Twitter, and you will know this with what you do, is that of course Twitter is completely public and transparent. So when we talk about conversational volume and so on, the brands can actually go and interrogate that data for themselves. But that was probably like the biggest shift we noticed was that, wow, when we're not spending 90% of the meeting defending data points, we're actually getting onto the meat of what matters.
The whole landscape seems to be changing a bit. And do you have any thoughts on where the next big shift in the digital media space may go? And this comes from, even just this week, I see a lot of discussion around media agencies becoming slightly less relevant as some large organizations are trying to build their own internal competencies. And while that doesn't necessarily impact what you guys do, do you have any thoughts on that changing landscape?
Wow, that's a big question. I think so. Something we are definitely seeing is that there's starting to be a lot of overlap between different types of digital solutions out there. So for example, something that we are seeing is that the medium of chat is becoming a great platform for lead gen. And we now, you can actually, for example, you can place ads on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter right now that trigger a WhatsApp conversation or a Telegram conversation, so we're actually seeing the medium of chat, which is super intuitive for all of us. We live on it all day long. So we're starting to see a lot of crossover over there. I think with programmatic, it's been a buzzword for a long time, but it's also not done well. We all have that experience and actually that's where cookies start beginning to fall away. and really falling away early next year, are going to force brands to be smarter about how they target individuals. We all have that experience where you've just browsed something on Take a Lot, and you've actually checked out and bought it, and 10 minutes later you're still being sold that product that you've already purchased. And that's not great. It's not a great user experience. It's not great for the brand either. And so I definitely think there's going to be a lot of sophistication coming into programmatic. And then of course we know that video is becoming progressively more mainstream. It's got phenomenal advantages for brands. Probably my biggest frustration is that we still see big business buying media like they're buying TV or print. So we still see big business allocating R1 million there and letting it burn, rather than sort of taking advantage of media and monitoring performance and actually shifting budget according to what works. So, I mean, that's been available to us since the advent of digital, but many businesses still don't take advantage of that freedom and flexibility to adjust based on what they're seeing. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of change. I would say video is an interesting one. And then to just touch on that as well, from the Snapchat point of view as well, we've also started to see a big shift in metrics as well. So brands are starting to think, so for example, we have 1 or 2 brands that the only measure they're interested in is sentiment. They for them, how their customers feel about them is more important than clicks and impressions and click-through rates. And then with Snapchat, what we focus on heavily there is we actually talk about playtime. So, successful advertiser on Snapchat in South Africa achieves between 1 and 2 years of playtime in a day with the lens, which is incredible. Yeah. So I think it's we all talk about clicks and everything, but time for me is a far more compelling data point. You manage to engage an audience for a year. That's really interesting. And time leads to recall. Time leads to the consumer building a real connection with your brand.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things I keep hearing more and more actually over the last year is this idea of salience, recall and salience, and you're right. I think that's becoming way more important than the volumetric stuff that we've been used to for the last couple of years. I guess maybe just looking back then at the last, is it almost 12 years of Dynamo and Blue Robot? What do you think gave you guys that unfair advantage in the market or as a company? Was it something cultural? Was it product? Was it, how would you really define the causes of that success?
For Dynamo, I would say obviously being brave enough to being bold enough to build something that competes with a dominant player, and then secondary to that, being in a fortunate position to have brands and agencies and publishers out there who are prepared to give us a chance. Because you can be as brave as you want, but if there's no one else brave around you, it's pretty pointless. But I would say that, and then obviously, as you mentioned, Twitter was a big inflection point for the business, and not only commercially, but also in terms of the habits and skills we were taught. So I would say that like a lot of our DNA is thanks to Twitter. In terms of like how we forecast, how we sell, being able to take a gifted salesperson and distill what it is they're doing successfully and make that teachable to a larger sales force. And I think that South African businesses, we are very much relationship. I remember my first couple of quarters with Twitter, they were saying, "Oh, you're going to miss Q2," and I said, "Don't worry, we'll do better next quarter." And then you start to recognize that you're reporting into a business that reports to their shareholders quarterly. If you miss enough quarters, you do miss the year anyway. And also South Africans are very nervous about the term sales. And at Dynamo, over time, has learned to embrace the concept that we are a sales business. And everyone out there is sales, whether they like it or not. CEOs of big business are in sales. And, the sooner that you, I think, accept that you are in a sales role and stop trying to put lipstick on the pig. People want to be biz dev or this or that, but they never want the word sales in their titles. It's very South African. And we've come to embrace the idea that we are in sales, we have targets, and we chase them.
I love that. Sean, very inspirational. I've always loved what you guys do and the culture that you've created and the business you guys have built over the years. So thank you so much. It's really been great to chat to you. You good?
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Kelvin.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean.
Okay. Have a good one. Cheers.